There are times that you feel like you hit a plateau with painting, and then a technique you haven't tried just seems to make what was difficult before just click. This recently happened to me, and the technique doesn't even involve picking up a brush. Here are some models I was painting before and after introducing the technique that I feel has upped my painting game and improved a range of areas of my skills. What you might notice is improved positioning of lighting, smoother blends, and attempts at techniques not present in the former models, such as OSL. Not only that, but the time it took to paint the latter models was in many cases a lot shorter. And all I had to do was take a photo of my subject before I began painting. Let me explain. In the past few years, I have been working on improving a number of techniques such as layering, glazing, stippling, non-metallic metals, and object source lighting. I made some good improvements to these areas, some more than others, and was happy with my progress. However, when I was painting with glazing and stippling to create blends, or painting skin tones and faces, I was never certain where exactly to place my highlights in a blend and tried to go with what I thought was best. The thing about light is that it reacts to all sorts of surfaces, and even trying to guess where it falls with best estimates still might be wrong and look unnatural. Whilst browsing miniature painting content on YouTube, there were a few videos on value sketching, and the one that stood out the most to me was by Zumikito Miniatures. As soon as I saw the video, I felt I had to give it a go. So the process goes like this. Paint your model black. Forget about zenithal undercoating and just paint the model black. Then, find the best viewing angle of your model and use a light source to light it in a way that looks cool or creates the effect you want to replicate. Then, take a photo of it. Use that photo as a reference for you as you paint the model. It will supply you all of the light values you need and where they fall to get the best result for your mini. Saying that though, there are some steps to take when you are painting to get the best results possible whilst making use of your reference photo. Just bear in mind, this technique is new to me and I am still finding my way, but I am seeing some positive results from the following approach. I take my photos using the Adobe Lightroom app on an iPhone. It's free and was recommended in Lyla Mev's guide to photographing miniatures. Since using it, I haven't looked back and highly recommend it. Once you have the photo of your black painted miniature from its best viewing angle, you can edit it by upping the contrast so that the highlights, midtones and shadows are very easy to see. I do the same from the back of the model so that I have some light reference for another angle. Before I make use of these photos, I use Lightroom's photo editing to increase the contrast so that the highlights and shadows are exaggerated. I can adjust brightness as I need it, and I can increase the difference between the whites and blacks. Once finished, I export the picture to an iPad that is set up on my painting desk, and I am ready to go. We are finally ready to paint. The first step is going to be to more or less ignore the photo and get my color scheme decided. To do this, I paint the base coat color for each part of the model. When choosing the base coat color, I'm looking to go a little darker than my midtone. I don't want to go as dark as my shadow, but it is much easier to go from a dark midtone and raise it up to the highlight for two reasons. The first is that it's easier to go from dark to light in general when painting miniatures, as the highlighted areas are usually easier to reach than the shadows. The other reason is it will help us build important contrast for the next step, which is to value sketch the highlights across the model. This is when we look at our reference photos. Take a bright highlight color and sketch in the highlights, trying our best to match the picture as best we can. It's important to note that different materials have different properties with light reflection. Plate mail armor is going to reflect a whole lot more than a worn leather bag. But these differences can be worked on after we finish the value sketch. For now, we just want to know where the light is falling. With the highlights sketched in, the contrast is so great that it looks very unnatural. So now we have to blend these layers together. I strongly recommend using a wet palette for this, as you want your paints to stay wet, and we are going to be thinning the paints quite a bit. For me, there's a lot of back and forth with the paints that I'm using, so keeping them moist saves a lot of time and paint. To blend the layers together, I'm looking for a color between the dark base tone and the highlight. It depends on the paint being used, but I usually mix about 50-50 and then thin down to a glaze. I may not begin with a glaze, but eventually the glaze is what's going to make the smoothest blends. With glazes, the paint is very thin, so load the brush, remember to wick it, and either stipple the paint or draw it in a specific direction. I usually draw from light to dark on the model. Wherever your paintbrush ends up is where it pulls, and I find that going towards the dark usually makes the blend smoother. But if it isn't quite as smooth as you want, after the paint is dry, you can apply another glaze in the other direction, but be sure to stop where the glaze pulled and don't drift into your highlighted area. Otherwise, you will lose the gradient you work so hard to build. Now, you can spend as much time as you want on these parts, and generally the longer you spend glazing, the smoother the blend will become. I am still learning about painting different materials and how they react to light, but this is my general rule. If you are painting something that reflects light a lot, such as metal, then make the contrasts strong and sudden. This helps exaggerate the amount of light reflecting off the material. When painting cloth, the light is reflected in a more dispersed fashion. This means the blends between highlight and shadow need to be wider and not as contrasting. You still need contrast because with mini painting, contrast is the name of the game, but you won't need as much compared with a very reflective material surface. Here you can see there are highlights and shadows on the leather strap with smooth blends that don't have sudden contrast. In comparison, the sunglasses have a very narrow window between the highlight and shadow. What I really like about this approach of taking a photo with the lighting all mapped out for me is that it reduces my uncertainty when painting and lets me focus simply on the color scheme without having to guess where and how to map out the light. The added bonus of removing this uncertainty is that it speeds up my painting process and reduces the time I spend staring at the miniature, not sure of what to do next. It has also improved a lot of my layering, stippling, and glazing skills. I had been learning these processes, but something about them wasn't quite clicking for me. The missing ingredient, it seemed, was natural light placement. I now find that my results from these techniques are now so much more effective. I've even been able to try some OSL and not instantly hate the result. So there it is, value sketching has now become an integral part of my painting process. Just the same as using a wet palette was, or getting an overhead light. If you are not value sketching using photos and you feel you have hit a slump with your painting, then try this. It might just be the thing you need to push your painting to the next level. Thank you very, very much for watching until the end of the video. If you did enjoy this video and you're not already subscribed and you would like to see more of this kind of content, please subscribe down below with that big red button. And please just throw in a like. It doesn't take very much, but it really, really helps me out. Also, please add any comments that you have down below. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.